you have to configure on the YouTube side?
It's
there you go.
It's in Zoom.
Live streaming on YouTube. And so view stream on YouTube, copy streaming link. All right, I guess we're live. This would be our YouTube live stream link. All right, fantastic. And so view stream on YouTube, copy streaming link. All right, I guess we're live. Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share this out. Welcome all who are going to see this live or who are watching it later. This is our first live AMA, which technically starts in another 15 minutes. So we were starting this up early. So we will probably end up editing this or putting timestamps in the description later after this becomes video, so we can more easily jump right to the interesting stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and share this out and invite people in, and we're going to do an AMA in about 15 minutes. Unless you want to, John, just cancel this now that we know it works and restart it in 15 minutes. That's another option as well.
We'll just stay here.
All right.
All right, cool. Shared out that link. Let's check the Telegram. Cool. All right. Hopefully we'll get a trickle of people coming in. Yeah, one thing I really like about what's been going on with the community lately is that we're starting to see people ping a lot of other apps and a lot of other exchanges and wallets about FIO protocol. So that's pretty cool to see. Just saw someone on Twitter just ping Celsius Network, who we've been trying to get in contact with for a while.
Yeah, I've been really excited to see that people in the community stepping up and recognizing like, man, this thing is so cool. I just need to get it into the wallets and exchanges and things that I use on a daily basis. I was thinking this yesterday that like, I think I tweeted about this yesterday or the day before, the idea that it's really exciting to use something, to be involved in something that every time I use it, I feel more and more excited about it. And every time I can't use it, I'm like, man, that's just terrible. You know, like the old way of doing cryptocurrency. If I can't send a FIO request, if I can't put memo data in why, you know, what this payment's all about, I'm just like, that's just really, is that how it still works? And I get excited more and more about each product and service quickly integrating FIO, because I think it's such a better experience. I'm going to share this real quick on my Facebook as well. So that's
cool. I'm going to give myself a virtual background. I don't think I have one.
I got the green screen going, so mine don't always look better though.
I have to go back to my toilet paper.
Oh yeah, there you go. My wife's a photographer as well, so I have a light box actually, which kind of lights up the face a little bit. But it's amazing how well that works with Zoom, even without that. It's kind of impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. Okay, we're getting some people. Hey everyone, feel free to make comments in the sidebar here. We should probably start off at noon here with a introduction for both of us.
Yes, so I was just sharing that link around a little bit. It's actually my first time doing a live YouTube stream through Zoom.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I did a couple on my personal account using OBS, which is kind of like a streaming platform. And I haven't used Zoom before, but so you're gonna have to show me exactly what you did, John. You just went into the settings and just kind of said, hey, I want to stream. Did you have to share like a key or something?
No, so you need to do something with actually in your advanced settings. So under your Zoom account, so when you first log into Zoom on your desktop, under the settings section, there's an advanced settings place where you can enable live streaming, and you can actually live stream to both YouTube and Facebook Live, I believe. And once you enable that, it's going to ask you to authorize yourself on the YouTube channel. And so that's how you do that. So
Very cool.
yeah, maybe in the future.
How do you bring up the chat without like the video playing also, or do you just mute it? Oh, I see the chat in there. And that's in real time there?
Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, sweet. Shout out to Bill Klein. Good to see you, sir. Very cool. And you dropped that in the Telegram as well, in our FIO Telegram?
Yep, I did.
Just want to give a huge shout out to the FIO Telegram community. It's been amazing to see, we went from like 1,900 over 14,000 in a very short amount of time. I know a lot of you were excited about, the address giveaway we did with BitMax, which was very exciting. We did various different competitions and airdrops and things like that. We did what we call an earned airdrop, which is nice in that people had to watch the Explain It video and fill out a quick little quiz to kind of make sure they even understand what FIO is. Unlike a lot of projects out there that are just trying to, hype their token, we're actually interested in people knowing what we're doing, how we're making cryptocurrency easier to use for everyone, not just our own little project, but every project in the space, making it easier to use with FIO requests, FIO data, and the human readable FIO names, which is just one part of it. And so it's been neat to see as people actually use it. And what we'll do too, if you want to drop in the chat, John, we could link out to where you can get yourself a free FIO address. You can get the Edge wallet, Garda wallet, and you can go ahead and get yourself a free FIO address. And as part of that process, you can send a FIO request with FIO data. And so that would be a request for funds. You could put information in there to say, hey, this is a request for funds for this particular thing. But it's also interesting in that you can do what we did today for this AMA. The last few days, people have been sending requests to John with their question for the AMA in the metadata for the request, which is kind of a cool idea. And so you can do contests, you can do giveaways, you can do quizzes, you can even do voting. You could do secure voting between the two parties. So no one would be able to see what your vote is, but you could send in your vote via FIO address. Kind of cool ideas that are made possible because of FIO request functionality. So I'm excited about diving into those questions, and thank you all again for joining us from the Telegram and also from Twitter and other places.
Yeah, I think one thing I like a lot about FIO and FIO requests, and FIO data actually in particular, I think is a feature that is a little underrepresented right now, just because I think a lot of people can't really conceptualize of what you put in the memo field aside from something very simple like for lunch or for the bar tab. But I think FIO data is actually really interesting because it actually provides an opportunity for a lot of protocols and for a lot of wallets to actually interact directly with their users, which is a huge problem as we've seen with a lot of wallets that we've worked with, which is that they don't really have a lot of ways to communicate with their own members, with their own users, which from a marketing perspective is a nightmare to not have the ability to have a connection with your users and be able to communicate with them outside of having a customer support line or something in Telegram or having a customer support line on Twitter. There's just not a whole lot of opportunities out there. And so I think FIO actually presents a really interesting opportunity for them.
Yeah, definitely. We were just in a meeting just talking about this, and oh man, thank you, Bill. Appreciate that share. It's the idea that like a lot of crypto projects, they don't even know who their users are. It's like, well, we see a bunch of addresses on a blockchain, on an Explorer, where clearly people have our token, but we don't know who they are. We don't know where they live. We don't know what they're interested in. We have no way of interacting with them. And I've been involved in, and we'll do intros here in another few minutes, but we just want to give people time to kind of connect and whatever. But it's the idea that, on Hive, you have this social aspect, we can connect, and then EOS is doing voice where you have this kind of, again, social aspect where you can connect. And I think that in the future, a lot of chains are going to have to think through how do we create social interactions. We look at the largest platforms on the planet, Twitter, Facebook, these are all human relationship interactions, and I think a lot of these systems that are going to think about how to think of value and blockchain and cryptocurrency as a method of free speech. It's a way to communicate with value. And so I'm very excited to have this ability to add this feature set to any cryptocurrency across the board without them ever having to do any type of direct integration with the chain. All it comes down to is just saying, well, which wallet is supporting your token? And as long as they're FIO inside, FIO enabled, then you immediately get all that wonderful functionality. I was just looking at a tweet earlier today. Garda Wallet tweeted out how the Nano cryptocurrency, for example, is in their mobile wallet. And I was really excited, but then I was like, oh, Garda added FIO to their desktop wallet, but not necessarily their mobile wallet yet. And just that, the idea of getting all the different pieces of the ecosystem integrated And a nano is a very interesting cryptocurrency. It's actually a DAG, a directed acyclical graph, very high performant, could become, a very interesting thing in the space, but it's kind of technically challenging to use because of the big crazy hashes. But if you implement it with FIO, now you get nice user, human readable names. I was chatting with the Nano community in their Discord the other day, talking about the Nautilus wallet and some of the other wallets, saying, hey, let's integrate with FIO. And it was just kind of cool to think, as long as you have one wallet that is integrated with that protocol for that token, then you immediately get the FIO usability. So if someone's saying, oh, that's so cool, I want to use it, where do I go? Well, just go download this wallet, and now you have that functionality, which is
I think one of the things too that I love about FIO, which a lot of people don't even realize, is that there are certain protocols that actually can't work with any other naming system. So specifically, a lot of these DAG-based protocols, so specifically I'm thinking of something like IOTA. So we've had a lot of people ask us about IOTA. It's not necessarily a cryptocurrency that's supported in a whole lot of different wallets quite yet, just because it's the integration for it's a little bit complicated. But with IOTA, you can't reuse the same public address twice. If you do it, you just lose your funds.
Seriously.
And that happened to a lot of people when they first got IOTA. They just assume it's the same as any other sort of UTXO-based chain. You can just go ahead and just send it the same address. And it's not great for privacy, but it still works. But with IOTA, it doesn't work that way at all. And FIO, as far as I know, is the only naming system that actually works fine with that. It will just continue to map to the newest public address being generated, and it works fine. But yeah, that sort of stuff that's a huge gotcha for people who are even in crypto that won't necessarily realize when they get into some of these other projects.
Yeah, and that's an important piece, is like when you get yourself a FIO address, you basically prepay for interacting with that blockchain using that address. You get 100 bundled transactions, and those transactions are automatically managed without you even having to think about it. And so when the wallet integrates in, for example, in IOTA or a situation where you have an HD wallet, which is deterministically creating new addresses with each transaction, it'll automatically remap that. I was actually thinking about this the other day, because for the foundation, I set up a treasury at FIO, and I had a Bitcoin address map there so we could transparently track the funds for the foundation. And I used my Ledger Nano to send a transaction, and it obviously used the new address because that's what Ledger does. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, it shows a zero balance now because we haven't yet integrated with the Ledger software that would automatically remap those. But that's the goal that we have, to get this integrated into every wallet, every exchange, every crypto-enabled endpoint, every NFT marketplace, every game, every place that is dealing with cryptocurrency, just making that whole process easier to use with human readable addresses, the ability to request funds and route payments in a more sane manner. The process of key exchange right now is really silly, where I give someone my public address and now you have to send a test transaction because you're like, is that really you? Did you get it? I'm not sure. Now we have a cryptographically secure way between two parties to know, yeah, I got that request. I know that's them, and I've interacted with them before at that same FIO address, maybe a different Bitcoin address, but that same FIO address, and I can absolutely know they control that private key and they are the right person I'm going to send funds to. It just makes the whole process so much easier, so much less stressful. I'm really excited about that. A question from Dan. Are we going to be taking questions in the chat as well? I know you've got a bunch of questions that came in through FIO Requests. I think we have a little contest going on. So we might have winners selected from the FIO Request participants, but I'm sure we might be able to come up with a little bit of a bonus we can throw out there for those who are on the live stream as well. That would be cool.
Sure. And you get a time check here, 11:58. All right, we'll wait a couple of minutes and then we'll get officially started.
Fantastic.
But yeah, we have a bunch of questions that came through FIO Requests. It's really cool to see that working.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was a little concerned that because there's a character limitation on that, right? The current
yeah. So we actually didn't quite realize that when I threw out the tweet, but yeah, FIO data, since it's kind of included in a lot of the other transaction metadata is included with that. There's kind of a floating character limit to some degree in terms of what can actually be included, but I think broadly 64 characters is what we can handle, and typically a longer sentence is somewhere between 70 to 80 characters. So 64 should have been fine for hopefully most people. But we did run into some people who tried to ask 3 or 4 questions all at once, which you definitely can't do. Not yet, at least. Maybe someday we'll figure out a way to scale that up.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, is that the block producers control all the fees on chain, and those fees are specifically coordinated based on the amount of data on chain that you have to store forever, because blockchains are immutable. And thinking through the right balance of like making that not have a high fee and really easy, but also not putting it too much data on the chain. The more I've been thinking about FIO data, I think there may be either a second layer solution or more a history-based solution that's able to link out to something with a hash, because that's another, you don't have to put all the data raw right in that FIO data. It can actually be a URL with a hash that validates the content of that URL. Right. So there's a multiple ways that it can be done. It's still in a decentralized way, but it's interesting to think, at some point, depending on how it goes, we might want to expand that FIO data to make it a little more structured just within that payload. But of course, we have to balance, what is the common use case, right? That's going to be kind of the number one thing.
Yeah, sure.
All right, it looks like it's 2 o'clock if you want to get started. How about you start with the intro for you, and then I'll start with intro for me, and we go from there.
Great. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first live stream for the FIO protocol and the Foundation for Interoperability. Today, we have the Managing Director, Luke Stokes, and me. My name is John. I work for a company called Dapix. We're the primary service provider for FIO. And I'll be facilitating this call, and we have a lot of questions that the community asks, which we're happy to get to. But let's go ahead and do a little bit of introductions here. So I come from a very strange background, actually, when it comes to blockchain. I learned about Bitcoin when I was actually a police officer in Seattle. And I worked in a division that primarily worked around gang and drug enforcement. And Bitcoin was kind of floating around at the time. And that's kind of how I learned about it. I learned it from a colleague, actually, that was involved in the case that involved Bitcoin transactions being made. And I thought at that point, the government's going to shut down Bitcoin immediately. This thing's going to be over by tomorrow. There's nothing here is interesting. And didn't pay attention to it again until 2017. Obviously, during the bull run, everyone started paying attention to Bitcoin. And that's the first time that I started to take a closer look into the actual mechanics of how Bitcoin worked. And I realized, oh, this isn't just some new piece of software. Bitcoin is almost like a new element that's been created into the universe. It's this thing that just exists now and will exist potentially forever. And it has these really unique properties to it, which can't really be replicated in the physical world. It really has some of these advantages of being a digitally native concept. And those things make it some of the strongest elements of money that I've ever seen. And so I'm definitely a hard money sort of person. And that's the thing that I like about Bitcoin. And since then, I've grown really interested in the rest of blockchain and seen how the rest of the community has gathered around decentralizing a lot of things that typically right now are controlled by central parties that mismanage those things. And so, yeah, that's kind of my background. So I'm kind of new to blockchain, but I've definitely been a big fan of it. So Luke, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks for that, John. Yeah, I've been in this space for a while now. I got involved in 2013, actually in January. My first interaction with Bitcoin where I fully got in was I spent $50 and I got 2.5 Bitcoin for $50. They were selling for about 20 bucks a piece. And then all of 2013, I just got super excited about it. I ended up starting a Nashville Bitcoin meetup when I lived in Tennessee there. And prior to that, I was running a company called FoxyCart. It was an e-commerce shopping cart company. So I was involved in the payment space and dealing with that. Hey, what's up, Brad? Shout out. And so it's just it was interesting that when I first saw Bitcoin, probably 2012, 2011 even, it was like, what's that fake internet money? Like, that's ridiculous. That's never going to go anywhere. But then I saw like Anonymous, the hacker group collective, like you putting it on their Twitter handle. I'm like, okay, these guys, they're not stupid. They're using this as money. This is weird. Let me look into this. And so then I went down the rabbit hole. As a computer science background, I really was interested in the technology for sure. But then I really went deeper into how it could change the world, thinking about decentralized money, decentralized systems. Ended up becoming a block producer on Steam, which is now Hive, the way I consider it, in 2016. I sold my company in 2018 to be fully involved in the blockchain space as a consultant and advisor. I was also a block producer with EOS DAC and the EOS community. I've worked with various different projects and things, and I got involved in FIO a little more than a year and a half ago. It was actually October, and then came on board in January as a consultant, and then in December of last year, ended up stepping up as the managing director for the nonprofit part of FIO, the Cayman entity. So I'm really excited about usability in the payment space, about self-sovereign control of your own value. Like you're talking about hard money and these things, as I looked at like central banking and all that. I'm super passionate about making cryptocurrency easier to use. That's why I liked Steam. It was a blogging platform that everyday people could use. And same with Hive today, it's just people can use it and it's not complicated. But that's only one ecosystem. And I was really excited about FIO providing that same level of usability as far as human readable names. And then in addition to the FIO request and FIO data across every blockchain. So then it's kind of every different silo, all these little tribes right now that we have, they all can start working together because we all have, I think, shared goals to make money better and to actually get away from these other systems that are somewhat centralized and in some cases violently controlled by governments. So I'm very excited to be participating in this project and I'm looking forward to the AMAs. So let's jump in.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I think just for the sake of getting through the questions that were submitted to me, I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions that were sent through a FIO request first, and then we'll go into the YouTube comments and then answer those as well. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. All right. So the first question that we have is from Google Aguarda. That's a nice FIO address that you got there. Just about how essentially do we approach exchanges? Do we have any sort of special deals or offers, or what's our philosophy in terms of approaching exchanges? Now, obviously, that's kind of two questions. Exchanges, obviously, there's a listing part of it, and then there's the integration part. So, Luke, you have the insight there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's an interesting one. It's funny because as everybody knows, we got listed on the largest, exchange on the planet, as far as the centralized exchanges, Binance. And there's a meme in the crypto space, when Binance, right? It's pretty clear that Binance Labs was an early investor, but Binance Labs doesn't actually list a lot of the tokens they invest in. So that's not a guarantee you're going to be listed if you have the interest of Binance, for example. And so I knew actually after we got listed that I was going to get this question from my friends, like, hey, what secret sauce did you have to get listed on Binance? Right. And I've already had a number of friends ask, and I knew like, I can't answer that question because there's no secret sauce. Ultimately, these exchanges are going to do what's in the best interest of their customers and their community. And a big part of it is essentially demonstrating that what you're doing matters, in my opinion, and not just matters from a, technological perspective, but from a community perspective. Because I do believe layer 0 is the community. That's where all the security comes from, the people who purchase a token to secure it via the rewards given to the block producers, those who are building on top of it as the developers, those who are going to integrate it into their products and services, whatever solution provider you are bringing as a cryptocurrency, that's really important. So I would say the process going forward has been, or the process to get here has been just a lot of open conversations with the communities to explain what we're doing, how it's value add. There's obviously a lot of back and forth for them to get educated on what we're doing, to even get those conversations started. Some of them are really responsive. Some of them you kind of have to ask back and forth. And then of course you get a whole bunch that are just flooding you with, we want to list your token, we want to list your token. And it's kind of like, well, you're not really a major player in the space, and reputationally it's important for us to think about, how is FIO represented? So it's like ultimately, the foundation only plays one small piece of this. It's really the block producers that are running the blockchain. There is no, central company that is doing this. For example, it's a Cayman nonprofit that is helping facilitate for the community. So it's an interesting process. I wish I had a better answer because I know I wasn't as familiar with it going into it prior to FIO. I've been involved in a lot of projects, but stayed away from the kind of exchange conversation side of it. But I do think that going forward, it's now that we have liquidity for the token and we have a great community supporting us with BitMax and finance, we certainly are going to have plans to integrate in the future with other exchanges, get listed and integrate. But ultimately, our focus is going to shift towards integration because we really think the value of FIO is going to be on integrating it into the deposit and withdrawal section for the exchange. It's going to cut down on their customer support costs. It's going to make the user experience much, much easier. So it's not going to be this, barrier of entry and hindrance for new entrants to the space. When we're looking at getting beyond just a handful of millions of people into hundreds of millions and even billions of people, clearly I think that usability has to be solved, and the exchanges play a major role in the day-to-day process of how people experience cryptocurrency. So if we can make that easier, we can help everybody. So yeah, it's kind of a long answer to a short question, but it's a complicated question, and I don't have good answers for exchanges. Those who want to talk to exchanges, one thing I would say is don't bug them. They've got a business model, they've got priorities. They don't want to be shilled, projects constantly. Just create a good value proposition, build your community, and go from there.
Yeah, and I think exchanges in particular, have such a unique position in regards to FIO. Most projects, they just want to get listed, right? And we get all this sort of information in our Telegram all the time of when are we going to get our next listing? When are we going to get our next listing? And to us, there's definitely a Pareto principle when it comes to listings, right? You know, we have Binance. It's, you know, by far probably one of the largest exchanges in the world. There's really only a handful of extremely high volume exchanges that exist, period. Obviously, there are some in the US that we would love to be on, but that just takes time because of the government that we have here. And for us, though, a huge focus is definitely this integration of the FIO protocol, because this is one of the use cases that I think it's probably most evident to a lot of people. You know, not necessarily a whole lot of people are just sending crypto to one another on a day-to-day basis, but I think a lot of people who are involved in crypto are traders. They frequently send their tokens from their cold storage to their hot wallet to their exchange, and then they transfer something different back to themselves. And all of that is made really, really easy through FIO addresses and FIO requests. And so I think the idea of being integrated with exchanges, I think sometimes the community thinks that, oh, this is just the same deal as any other token, just get listed on as many places as possible, and, you know, whatever, that provides liquidity or something. But we have a different philosophy. I mean, there's definitely an actual use case that exchanges have for the FIO protocol, and we want them to get that. One of the things that I think we would both agree is BitMax was a great initial exchange partner. They did such a great job of really digging into what our protocol was actually about, how it actually helped their users specifically, and really thinking through, oh gosh, like how can we actually use the FIO protocol in our own exchange, in the send and receive section of it, to actually help our users either get more crypto into our exchange to trade, or to get it back out and put it into their cold storage, wherever. And a lot of these exchanges, I think people always say, not your keys, not your crypto. A lot of these exchanges agree with that. I think a lot of exchanges, I saw Jesse Powell from Kraken recently talk about this, about how he doesn't want people to just leave crypto on the exchange because then he's liable for it. He doesn't want to deal with that. So he tells people, get your crypto off of Kraken as quickly as possible. Just do what you have to do, and then, you know, move your crypto off. And I think a lot of exchanges are going that way, but it's hard. It's stressful. There's a lot of things with sending and receiving crypto that is difficult that FIO makes substantially easier. So let's see, kind of along with that, it kind of goes into a good second question. So from, I can't even pronounce this, but this is another Gorda FIO address. How does the FIO protocol benefit users today?
And this is funny. We just got out of a meeting earlier today where we're hammering on the value proposition and doing a better job of clarifying what FIO adds to someone's day-to-day experience of cryptocurrency. So the way I kind of talked about it is basically from a highest level view, we want mass adoption of cryptocurrency. Those who are in this space believe this is the future of programmable money. Peer-to-peer digital cash is kind of the beginning of all of this, and we're still seeing that vision realized. And it's too hard. It's just too complicated, too confusing. Dealing with public addresses, not knowing that you are sending to the right person, it's very stressful and confusing. So the value this adds to people today is that you have a much, much better user experience for sending and receiving cryptocurrencies across the board. So a human readable address, the request for send functionality, and the ability to add metadata to that transaction, whether it's a request or a send. So you can know later when you go back to it, what was that for? And it's done in a secure private way. So those two people, that metadata, the token used, and the amount, that's encrypted between those two parties. So I think for me, it's about the stress of the last 7.5 years as a programmer, as a technologist, as someone who can understand this stuff. I still feel stressed validating each one of those characters, you know, the first few characters, the second few characters, and just really making sure is that really the right Bitcoin address? Did I copy and paste that incorrectly? You know, I was sending out to 3 different people. I got to make sure I have the right, you know, address. And, you know, QR codes are insecure. There's no encryption involved in there. You know, there's man in the middle attacks that can happen. So there's just a lot of stress and uncertainty with using cryptocurrency today that we want to eliminate. We want to make it very simple. You know, somebody sending Bitcoin Cash to a Bitcoin address or vice versa, someone trying to send Bitcoin to an Ethereum address and they're confused, you know, making that super simple. Luke at Stokes, you can send me any crypto you want. You know, that type of thing, I think is just really valuable. And I hope others agree. That's really kind of the experiment we're running right now. Do people care about usability on blockchain, or is it just going to stay hard to use forever? You know, are we going to make it so simple that it's like PayPal or Venmo for crypto? And are we going to make that in such a way that, you know, our moms and our grandpas and our grandmas and our kids and everyone can then get onto cryptocurrency and start using it? That's the question.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, it's funny, we talk sometimes about, you know, making crypto so easy that our grandparents can use it. I mean, grandparents can barely use a VCR. But I think the thing that I like about the FIO protocol in particular is that when it comes to public addresses, the key is not to make it easier to manage public addresses. The goal is that people just never learn about it in the first place. And I think that's a point that I think is lost a lot. We're not just trying to make it so that you have an easy place to manage where all your public address mappings. We're trying to just eliminate the problem of public addresses in the first place, of even having to learn what that concept is to start. And I think that by itself is a huge issue. I mean, I'm trying to imagine trying to explain even just the basics of what a public address is to somebody that doesn't have some level of experience with cryptography, or even what a private key is and all that sort of stuff. And it's way, way, way too much. And I think you're going to lose a lot of people. You know, on Twitter, there's been this big thing, the guy who's in charge of Barstool Sports. I don't know if you saw this, Luke. He invited the Winklevoss twins over to his house to teach him how to get Bitcoin. And, you know, this is a guy who's basically like has become like a degenerate day trader and it's just made a complete mockery of finance in the last couple of weeks, because this guy's just been like randomly trading options, I think on Robinhood or something. And it's just been like destroying these like professional investors by just kind of YOLOing into random things. And he's been really interested in the Bitcoin lately. But he frequently, whenever he talks about it, he just talks about like, you guys are just talking at like a level that's just like beyond me. I don't care. Just tell me like how to get this stuff and like how to use it. And I think people oftentimes in this space don't respect how little effort anyone is willing to actually put into learning about this. It's kind of astounding, actually. Sometimes, you know, I know we have this ethos in the crypto community of, you know, it really matters that you take sovereignty over these things, and this whole vision that we have for people having control over their money. But a lot of people, that's just several steps away. I mean, we want them to get there, but just the initial step of how do I get this and how do I safeguard it, like that is already several steps probably too much for them. So I think FIO protocols can play a big part in helping solve that. But so we actually had a follow-up question to this from Stegosaurus at Edge. Where do you see the FIO protocol in 5 years? Not just the protocol itself, but maybe talk about too, just your own vision for kind of the DAC model as well that you've been thinking of.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I'll start with just the foundation, the part that I'm part of as the managing director. I've been involved with EOS DAC for a couple of years now. I'm very passionate about decentralized governance systems. And so I've been thinking about FIO running, the actual nonprofit entity running as a DAC, a decentralized autonomous consortia. So it's a group of the major players in the industry, wallets, exchanges, protocols, payment gateways, you know, any group that's involved, to have decision processes over the budget, how we spend the foundation resources, how we determine the future of the protocol, along with obviously the block producers who are ultimately the end deciders as far as the protocol goes in the decentralized network. But the idea being this open transparency that can be validated on chain, voting on chain, all of those things on chain, I'm really passionate about. I think this solves a lot of the problems we see with corruption. You know, whenever you give power, especially to a centralized entity, it tends to lead to corruption, and that ends up harming people that otherwise wouldn't be. And so I'm very excited about the path forward we have for using these things I've been playing with for a long time. I'm also part of the IEEE panel on governance. You know, there's a group there that's trying to define the lexicon and the standards for how we talk about governance in a blockchain and decentralized systems. I've been working with the Casper Labs group and the developer DAO as well, who's also doing some interesting things on reputation staking protocols and reputation staking pools for doing governance. So I'm very, very passionate about all that kind of stuff. So within that framework, I think of FIO as being able to become an industry consortia of, you know, something that is beyond one tribal identity, you know, something where every blockchain on the planet, every cryptocurrency project, and every service within that ecosystem, every wallet, exchanges, payment gateway, they can all come together and treat FIO as something that is theirs, something that they have ownership of, because they can actually jump into the governance side of it, either by running a block producer or by, you know, putting themselves out there to be voted onto the board. And so I see this as being the industry standard for cryptocurrency across every project. And I see it as being something that opens the floodgates for mass adoption. The internet was around for 10 years prior to a usability layer like HTTP that would create the opportunity for World Wide Web and web browsers. And I see FIO in a similar way. We're more than 10 years of cryptocurrency. It used to be they were making fun of us and ignoring us, and now they're starting to fight us a little bit, but also they're just starting to join us as well. You see banks, in the last few weeks talking about being able to being able to hold cryptocurrency and in a custodial way. So there's all these different interesting things happening that are demonstrating not only the major financial industry, but also the governments and other places realizing like, okay, we can't fight this. It's decentralized and distributed, so we better join it. And so in that model, I think of cryptocurrency being mass adopted by the world and FIO being the floodgate opener to make that possible, because all these corporations that are kind of sitting on the sidelines going, okay, blockchain and crypto is interesting, but it's a little too hard to use right now. How do we make it so that we can introduce it to our customers and start reaping the benefits of these systems? And I think FIO is going to provide that.
So yeah, I think a follow-up question I have on that is, how do you envision FIO potentially playing a part in the traditional banking system someday? Because we are seeing reports of JP Morgan is getting into blockchain. We just saw a report, I think yesterday, about I forgot who it was, Goldman Sachs, I think maybe, hired a head of digital assets. And so we have these traditional players who are now trying to get into blockchain. Now, it's not entirely clear what exactly they want to do within digital assets. They haven't really made it clear what their play actually is. But I'm just kind of curious about whether or not you see FIO being a bridge of some sort potentially between these two worlds, or where now we're just going to live in kind of decentralized. Because I don't really know how banks intend to use digital assets aside from maybe custody and storage. That's something we've already talked about, and that's definitely something that they can do. But in terms of bridging kind of the gaps between these two ecosystems, do you think FIO plays a part in that?
Yeah, no, I'll tell a story from my friend Jeff at the Divi project. The Divi is doing some really interesting things, really interesting protocol to check out. And they literally have physical buildings that are helping with remittances. So you can go in, just like you go into a Western Union, you go into a building and you can actually do transactions, and you can get yourself, a Divi wallet that will take your identity information and all that. And with that wallet, it's also a bank account. So they've kind of merged these two stories. And it was really interesting talking to Jeff about how that happened, where he sat across the table from a bank, and it was kind of like, you guys realize we're going to take away your business model, right? Like, you're not going to exist in the future, right? Like, you're almost the enemy, right? You realize this, huh? And they're like, yeah, why do you think we're talking to you? Like, we need to preserve our own existence by partnering with cryptocurrency projects, because we realize we're going to go away. So essentially, my understanding is, and I'm probably getting the details wrong, but they partnered with a bank in order to facilitate that merger of the old way of doing things onto the new way of doing things. And with just a quick picture and some documents, you can get up and running with a bank account that also has crypto features built into it. And so, of course, with the banking system, there's the overnight interest rates, there's the NACHA files, there's credit card fees. The traditional financial institutions have a lot of middlemen taking out their cut. And where if you could just bypass all of that and go crypto to crypto, person to person, I think there's a lot of value for the users in the financial world. And also financial tools like DeFi. There's a question here in the chat about DeFi. DeFi is a huge, big deal because it cuts out the middleman, where you can actually have smart contracts manage a lot of the functions that used to pay banking employees and pay for all of these security audits and all these things related to banking, that you just, FDIC insurance and all this kind of stuff. If you have contracts that you can trust, you can actually just know on chain that's all going to work. So I think that FIO in particular is going to play a huge role in making these crypto assets that are currently really confusing and difficult to deal with much easier to understand. So, and that's just, you have a Luke at, whatever bank, and you have maybe the major cryptos, maybe top 5 or something like that. And I don't have to, as you said earlier, ever see a public address. It's just super simple to understand. These are my assets, just like I'd have a stock portfolio. And I wouldn't have to, worry about how complicated it is to send and receive. It's actually going to be super simple, just like PayPal or Venmo.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's especially with the advent of DeFi over the last couple of years, it's been really interesting to see how traditional banking is going to respond to this creation of decentralized infrastructure. And it's fascinating to me. I've always said that the biggest threat to decentralization isn't necessarily a government state actor. It's actually just a centralized incumbent that basically optimizes their own offerings. So traditional banking somehow figures out how to make payments feeless and fast. And gosh, I think even a couple of days ago, the Federal Reserve announced some sort of system that they're creating that allows for more 24/7 sort of operations. And I think they're seeing the emergence of some of these decentralized tools that are occurring that potentially make what they do fairly obsolete. And so the question is whether or not they can actually just create an alternative that's essentially the same thing, but not decentralized. And whether or not people are willing to accept that. I always say the thing that ultimately, not that necessarily killed torrent, but kind of defeated a large part of its use case in terms of illegally downloading movies was Netflix. They just made it really easy and just not really difficult to get movies. And so they just kind of changed the business model. So I'm really curious to kind of see how traditional banking tries to play against DeFi. I mean, they have a lot of baggage they obviously have to get through in order to provide the same offerings, but maybe they could get there. So we have one question from Real Rico Silva at Edge. In terms of integration then for FIO, he's curious about what's kind of the average time and workload that it takes to actually get this into one of your products. Let's say for a large exchange, what sort of lift does that take?
That's a good question. And it depends on, again, you mentioned exchange. It's going to be a little different for a wallet than for an exchange because there's different features that you want to implement. And we actually just updated the website on the knowledge base last night. I think there's a new page that kind of talks about the benefits for integration. And in that benefits page, it kind of breaks down these different major categories of integration. So it's all kind of broken down into steps. And we actually have the hours, the average developer hour time that we kind of assume that would take and what the cost would be. And we're trying to incentivize that as a foundation. So we do have tokens set aside in our budget for incentivizing wallets and exchanges to do the integration. So I would love, we could put that link in the show notes afterwards for you guys to check that out. And it's basically just kind of based on the depth of integration that you're going to do. So the first part of it is really simple, just a FIO send. And that is, I think we have maybe 8 or 16 hours there. It's not a whole lot of time for the developer. And it's as simple as just hitting an API either through the SDK or directly to do a lookup to say, hey, who's Luke at Stokes if I want to send him Bitcoin? And they hit out the FIO API to one of the nodes and get back an answer to that. And then they can go ahead and send the Bitcoin. So that part's really easy. And then there's just different phases that are a little bit more complex or easier as you go along. I think the FIO request and FIO data is the one that's a little bit more complicated because you're dealing with encrypting data and encrypted packages of data that you're sending back and forth. But I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the total is. I think we had like Eugene, for example, in the tribe community, he has his own wallet he just built, and he told us he did it in about 2.5 weeks, the whole integration. And of course, there's bug fixing and other things to do after that. And he's a pretty good developer, so I'm not sure that would be standard. I would say it's probably more standard to say maybe a month and a half of development time. It depends on the size of your team, the QA level involved, how old your code base is. It's a lot of different things involved. But our team, and when I say our team, I mean the foundation along with our main service provider at this point, which is Dapix, is readily available to be able to provide customer service, like tier 1 customer service. As you're doing integrations and you have questions on about how to do it, please let us know. The knowledge base is kb.fioprotocol.io, and the developer hub is is it developers or dev.fioprotocol.io? Developers, that's right. Developers.fioprotocol.io. Lots of great documentation there, and we're always working to improve that. But yeah, it's something that we want to make as easy as possible. So we want to continue improving our SDK, improving the different documentation and processes. So we readily invite any feedback you have as developers as you're integrating the protocol, so we can make it easier for you.
Cool. So we got one question actually, which isn't necessarily an AMA sort of question, but how do you feel, Luke, about us being called the chain link of usability?
Yeah, I just tweeted about that actually this morning because I've been seeing that more and more. Link is got a lot of excitement. Obviously, when the token price does what it's been doing lately, a lot of people get on board. But I also think it relates to kind of what is the word of the day for 2020 and possibly 2021? Interoperability. I've heard that thrown around a lot. And obviously FIO has interoperability in the name. I do think there's some interesting comparisons in that Chainlink is trying to get all these different blockchains at a low level to talk to each other via oracles and real world information to say, okay, this is information that is out there in the world, but you can now trust it and make decisions on it within your blockchain. And FIO is similar in that we're trying to get all these different cryptocurrencies, wallets, exchanges, these user experiences to be the same across all these different players in the space. And so I think it's a really interesting comparison, because like just like people recognize interoperability and the need for getting all these different pieces of information to work together, I think FIO is providing a similar experience that is consistent across all these different chains and wallets. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's a valid comparison?
Chainlink, I think, is a very fascinating project. They obviously have a very loyal following with the Link Army, or Link Marines. Sorry. I'm sure there's somebody who has Army in their name. But yeah, I think the idea of bringing together the ecosystem in the way that Chainlink does, I think, is a really fascinating way to describe it. One thing I actually have a question for you about, Luke, is just the future of interoperability in general. We've seen a lot of interoperability projects kind of spring up since we've started. I mean, we started this project a couple of years ago, kind of in the midst of the worst of the bear market, quite frankly. And so we've seen a lot of projects emerge kind of out of that. A lot of them obviously are on Ethereum, but we've also seen a lot of interoperability chains in Cosmos and Polkadot and some of these other chains. What do you see in terms of the future of kind of a multi-chain world? Do you think it's going to be a multitude of different chains, or do we think we're going to eventually maybe reach some sort of asymptotic phase where we only code like 3 or 4 or 5? What do you think?
It's a good question that I've seen a lot of different opinions on. Obviously, there's maximalists in each camp that think their token is going to be the only token to rule them all, and there's going to need to be everything else is done on side chains or done on second layers. And I think there's some good arguments there, some really good arguments. We just recently saw Ethereum Classic get 51% attacked, for example.
Twice.
Yeah, twice. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like there's some really good points to be made that you're when it comes to securing your own value, the value of the token, the value of the hashing power in the case of proof of work is really important, because that's what secures the chain. And so you don't want to spread that value too thin across too many different projects, because you're ultimately going to lose the security of what creates a Byzantine fault tolerant blockchain. The value of the cryptocurrency that's rewarded to the block producers is really important for the security of the network. So I think there's a strong argument to be made that we don't need a whole bunch of chains. I think I've heard the argument that we only really need maybe one proof of work chain, and every other chain could kind of hash into that. That's one argument that's interesting. But I also think that for performance-wise, you absolutely need multiple different experiments, in my opinion, to fully reach the full, the full breadth of what's possible with blockchain in the way humans interact. So when we look at the world today, we look at not just finance, but how business is done in the world. There's so many needs out there that could be radically improved, whether you're talking about supply chain management, whether you're talking about tracking of components all the way from source to destination. Like there's just so many different mechanisms, trust-based systems, escrows, notaries. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many pieces of the way humans do business now that relies on, third parties and counterparty risk and all these other things that could be eliminated with blockchain. I think there's tremendous value of interjecting blockchain technology into a lot of systems in the world today. And a lot of those can't be done one size fits all. So there's people talking about private chains and the value they have. And there's people talking about, different ways that we can, and this is my personal view on interoperability between chains is, use the right tool for the job. So you have different chains that might do something really well. And if we can get a better job of getting those to talk to each other, I think we're going to get a lot more value out of the ecosystem. So another example would be, Monero, privacy coin, which I'm pretty excited about. They recently tweeted about doing a wrapped Bitcoin transaction on Monero. So you could actually have your Bitcoin, but have it be private. There's a lot of hype in the EOS community about block one, investing in hashing power and things like that going, are they trying, there's a lot of rumors flying around, and I don't have insider information on this, but there's a lot of rumors flying around that, are they doing some kind of wrapped, Bitcoin on EOS where you could like get rewarded to provide, liquidity and stuff. So it's really interesting to see people are starting to wake up to the shared value of these communities. And really, this is Metcalfe's law. This is the network effect. Instead of being on our little silos, our little islands, we start working together, start using the best features of these different protocols together, we could have potentially a lot more value than we would otherwise. I had a conversation recently we were talking about Chainlink. FIO has a component that is an oracle for the price of the token that the block producers have to provide. And we were thinking, what would it look like if we used Chainlink for that, to provide that oracle? And these are certain examples of how we start thinking as an industry instead of as our own little tribes, doing our own little thing. So personally, one of my favorite conversations about that is Andreas Antonopoulos' talk on current money as language, and this idea that currencies can actually be a form of expression, that you'll use a token because it's part of your tribe, your community, but you could easily and very seamlessly, in a very liquid way, transfer value from one tribe to another tribe and transfer across these different boundaries, exchanging one token for another. There's the Bancor algorithm and a lot of these really cool kind of liquidity provider algorithms that I find very interesting, because you could actually put money into a system where you can have the liquidity you need to come in and out of that system without having a lot of slippage. So I'm very interested in that, and that relates to the DeFi solutions. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to what users want. If users want to have these different tokens that express their own individual preferences, then that's what they're going to get. If they want to have the security that comes with a strong chain that everyone is using, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum or EOS, some of these larger chains, then that's what we're going to get. But ultimately, I think no matter what, there's going to be enough valid projects doing different things in different ways to make something like FIO really needed. I don't think it's going to be one size wins all. You're going to need an interoperability layer to be able to transact in a consistent way across these different projects.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think, Andreas, in that where he talks about money as language, I think is a really fascinating concept. In this space, we talk a lot about network effects, and I find network effects really interesting because if you talk to some monetary maximalists, I guess is a one way to call them, is they talk about things like Gresham's law, right? Which is good money drives out the bad. And this is kind of the argument oftentimes for Bitcoin maximalism, which is if Bitcoin is the hardest money and the most scarce money that has the most solidified and obvious monetary policy, it's a better money than all the rest of the cryptocurrencies. So over time, people would just continually choose the better money, and all the rest of these coins would just kind of go by the wayside, and Bitcoin ultimately win. Andreas, I think, has actually said as a counter argument that, yeah, that sounds great, and Gresham's law is a good law, but it's not really a law that has necessarily always taken effect in practice. I mean, we live in a multi-currency world, which you could argue the reason why we live in a multi-currency world is because governments have used the threat of violence to actually enforce that. But who's to say that then there isn't a mechanism which might not be as harsh as that, but that still ends up kind of recreating a similar system in which people, out of their own volition of choice, just simply desire a multitude of currencies. And I think that's a viable future. And I think evidentially, just from the way that we've seen crypto sort of evolve over the last couple of years, that it kind of seems like what people actually prefer, at least in the short run, short to medium run. Maybe Bitcoiners are right and Gresham's law wins, and
grand experiment.
Right?
That's what we're doing.
Our grandkids in the future are it's only Bitcoin. That's it.
This is the experiment. How many more questions do we have as FIO requests? Because we have a number here in the channel as well. I want to make sure we get.
Yeah, let me go ahead and some of these questions are repeats. So let's go ahead and skip some of these. Actually, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and jump to the YouTube questions, since we're getting a little bit light on time. So let's go to the top here. Do we have a new juicy listing soon? We talked about this.
I would say, as far as that goes, obviously, we cannot and will not ever talk about exchange listings prior to them being publicly announced. It's really important. And if you are actually a project working with an exchange, it's really important that they maintain the integrity of their exchange, and they don't want to have insider information leaking out or anything like that. So, even if we did have information, there's definitely no way we could share it. We keep that stuff very, very secure, and we recommend you do the same, because again, it's just not fair. You want to make sure everyone has the same amount of information when they have an opportunity to participate in trading and stuff. So that is something that we would not be able to talk about, but stay tuned. Keep an eye on the Telegram announcement channel and on Twitter, and you'll know when we know in some cases.
Yeah. So what are we working on next? What's the next milestone? This is actually a topic that's been brought up in our Telegram a couple of times of, do we actually have sort of quarterly plans or anything like that? I don't think we strictly have. I mean, obviously different people probably have their own plans of what to do over the next couple of months, but do we actually have kind of here's like a roadmap that oftentimes you'll see on websites that's just like, this is what we're going to try to accomplish in the next 3 months?
We do have a roadmap on the knowledge base, which is more kind of high level. These are the different things FIO can evolve into. We have our FIPS, which we mentioned earlier, the FIO improvement proposals, which are up on GitHub. I think there's 13 or 14 different FIPS right now. Yeah. So currently, as an early stage project, we are, rapidly evolving towards, bugs that we find that we need to fix, improvements to the protocol to make it easier to integrate, certain feature sets that we wanted to implement prior to mainnet launch, but didn't get time to, such as transferring domains, things of that nature. So I think probably the best way to really dynamically understand what it is we're focused on is to keep an eye on those FIPS. As we come up with, here's the next thing we're going to work on, we create a FIP for it, we architect it out as far as the spec, and then we start getting the developers to work on it. I would say the next major features that as it influences our community would be the ability to transfer addresses and domains between different FIO accounts. And so that opens up the opportunity to building out an integration with, for example, an ERC 721. So you could trade domains or addresses even as NFTs on something like OpenSea. So that's something that we definitely want to work on. It's a big part of what we want to do. We've also been throwing around the idea of whether we build a FIO DApp, which would be kind of a full featured FIO example application. We're still kind of deciding whether that's the best focus of our time right now. That's one of the interesting things. But as far as the FIPS is the best way to see what we're actively working on. And then as far as down the road, other features we'd like to have, which would be, making multi-sigs easier to use, so you could actually use FIO as a routing protocol for multi-signature transactions, the ability to do subscriptions, potentially aliases. So you could have like email addresses and phone numbers, different things like that you'd want to make it even easier to use. We have a lot of different ideas. And what's the beauty about it is, again, it's not a centrally controlled entity. We get to float all these ideas out to the community, and we get the community to respond, whether that's the block producers, the token holders, those in the telegrams, kind of tell us, well, this is what we think is most important. And so that's where we're at right now. I think in the future, as we get a little more stabilized, we have our next major system upgrade coming in the weeks to come. I think we'll be able to more accurately kind of get our cadence together to say, here's what we're doing, here's how fast we're doing it. So here's what we can project in the next few quarters.
Yeah, just so people have context, we have a very large FIP that we've been working on that essentially, Luke, you can correct me if I'm wrong, eliminates kind of a lot of potential needs to do a hard fork for some of the changes that we want to do in the future. And so a lot of this is actually providing us the opportunity to add in more features and do maintenance with a lot less sort of headache. And so, yeah, and I think from a roadmap perspective too, this is something I always find very controversial in projects, is that you create a roadmap and then you just end up like missing most, if not all of them, because your priorities change. For FIO, our roadmap is kind of rolling, but it's also fairly the same, at least from in terms of what the FIO protocol, what we want to see it accomplish in the world. There's obviously technical things that are part of the roadmap, but in terms of how we see success is obviously just getting integrated into more wallets and more exchanges. One thing I'm really excited about is, so this morning, you guys may have noticed that I tweeted out that Infinito Wallet has announced that they're officially starting integration, which is great. We actually have 3 or 4 other wallets that we haven't put out there yet that have said, officially, we are integrating the FIO protocol. So I'm just going to kind of leak that out over the next couple of days. But yeah, wallets are integrating the FIO protocol. Obviously, we want exchanges to integrate the FIO protocol. That's a huge deal for us. And that's kind of the ongoing battle for FIO, is really just getting these integrations done and getting users FIO addresses and getting them excited about using the protocol. So yeah, that's kind of the everlasting roadmap item. All right, let's go back to the YouTube questions. Let's see.
If we've gotten through all the questions you've got, there's a number of great questions in here.
Yeah, Luke, if you see one that you want to answer, go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we have here, let's see, are you guys working on next? So we kind of covered that a little bit. I saw we were asking about, okay, here we go. The first question I think was from Abev. And we're not going to comment on price. Sorry, not going to happen. DeFi is a concept that has been mentioned a lot recently when blockchain projects started to build protocols and applications to support DeFi. So does FIO have any competitors in this field. The interesting thing about DeFi, and we've had this conversation, is a lot of those DeFi platforms are either built on Ethereum or EOS. And so they're built in kind of blockchains that are used to signing authenticator wallets, for example, whether that's MetaMask or Anchor Wallet. And so they're interacting with these contracts where that's kind of abstracted away as much as possible. So it's like FIO is less useful in my perspective when you're directly interacting all the time with a contract, but I think it can be really useful to make sure you're interacting with the correct contract, because I think that's a big security vulnerability in a lot of these Ethereum tokens and also EOS tokens, for example, where you don't know that you have the right contract when you authenticate with it. And so if instead of authenticating with this big crazy hash to say, yeah, you're about to interact with this FIO platform, this DeFi platform, you could actually interact with, the brand as a FIO address. And that would be where you're signing messages to, and you could know that that brand is controlled by the correct DeFi application that you're working with. I think that's one way that it can be really helpful. So people ask sometimes, is FIO DeFi? And I tweeted about this the other day as well. It was like, in a certain sense, every single cryptocurrency project is DeFi. Bitcoin is decentralized finance. It enables you to be your own bank. So, and I even this morning I tweeted about, or this morning or yesterday, I tweeted about BitShares being, and man, oh gosh, the results on that tweet, I've got like over 100 likes, and Dan Larimer jumped in and a bunch of other people jumping in. It was kind of surprising. I think Eric Voorhees replied as well, like a lot of interesting people chiming in on, BitShares was the original DeFi. It was doing BitUSD. You could issue your own assets, all these amazing things. Why didn't it take off? And it was just like, it was a very interesting conversation about the challenge with timing, the right, basically community marketing, getting people excited about it. And really branding, like DeFi was this concept that got branded very well. So people got excited about it, and BitShares didn't ever really have that. So anyways, if you're interested, go check out my Twitter thread, Luke Stokes. You can scroll back a little bit and see that thread is pretty intense. A lot of people talking about DeFi in there and what makes it work and what doesn't. Moving on to another one. What are your plans for the nearest years in terms of marketing and business development? So that's a great follow-up question to what we were just discussing. How do you plan to expand the network, community, partnerships, et cetera? And what's your vector? These are great questions. I think this is one of the things that we would love to engage the community more so, because we all have our ideas, right? We've got teams working on business development, working on these relationships and integrations with our partners. But we also understand that you all have many more connections than we do, and that's just the nature of the wisdom of the crowds. We'd love to get more people involved in our community saying, well, yeah, I know so-and-so at this protocol, or I know this person who works at this exchange, or I know this person who is working as a developer at this wallet. We would love for you to go on behalf of FIO to start talking to them and say, hey, do you know about FIO? Have you thought about usability of cryptocurrency and how we can make it easier? So I would answer that question and say, our goal is to activate you, to create incentives for you all to participate in those conversations and helping those people understand, what is FIO? Why is it important to me? How I can make revenue from it. That's a big part of this as well. We've architected the chain so that wallets can actually earn revenue via their users using the protocol, registering domains and addresses through their wallet. So there's a lot of really neat economic incentives for them to participate. And so our goal is to really create frameworks so it's easy for others to refer their friends, to get those conversations going. And then beyond that, we're expanding out beyond just DAppX, right? DAppX was the first company that kind of launched the protocol. And now we're shifting more towards the foundation itself through worker proposals. And we've got a worker proposal spreadsheet you can fill out. We're going to be improving that and responding to those more quickly in the future, and organizing that so that we have a funnel process for if someone's interested in helping or they're interested in integrating, how do we walk through empowering them with everything they need to do that? So it's a really good question. It's one that we're continually evolving. And so I would say today, join our Telegram, join our Discord, start the conversations there of how you can add value. And we'd love to talk with you more, because it's not just going to be, myself or a smaller group of people that makes this work. It's going to be everyone in the cryptocurrency community coming together to provide value and recognize like this is something we can all own, which is really important. Let me see another one here. Oh, Dan Shields. Shout out to Dan. We got a question here about, does FIO shield all base chain Bitcoin Ethereum transaction data? If so, did rebalancing of my account, someone watching my FIO address could not view all my balances? If so, how? We have a FIP called FIP5. It's a FIO improvement proposal that we're evaluating right now, and we'd love to get your feedback on it as well, which adds a lot of security and privacy to FIO. So right now, the way it works, if you do a FIO send or a FIO request, the data about that information, the token you're using, the amount you're using, and the memo of the data that you put in there is encrypted between those two parties. So basically using the public key, there's a shared key that's derived and all that information is secured. What isn't encrypted is knowing that person A interacted with person B. And what's also not currently encrypted would be the addresses that are mapped by person A and person B. So in theory, what you're saying is you could actually track what's changing on chain based on these interactions prior to FIP5 being integrated. Now, the deal with security in FIP5 is that, and the privacy part of it, it's challenging. It's going to involve encryption and decryption on the wallet layer, and not all the different integrators want to go through that extra effort to add that to their product and service. So we're reaching out to community saying, here's the design we have. We understand it's going to be a bit of extra work to do the integration, but we think it's really important. So we have a privacy committee that's been discussing and going back and forth on how to improve that, make it easier and better understand it. So if you are a wallet or an exchange and you're interested in privacy, we absolutely encourage you to join us in that conversation and help us kind of think through how we can make it completely as secure and as private as possible. A lot of wallet naming solutions don't even have that on their roadmap. It's all public, just like DNS, it's completely open. Whereas we think wallet naming should be as private as possible. So we're working towards that. And it is what it is today. There's certain aspects that are private and secure. Well, all of it's secure, but certain parts that are private. And then there's certain parts that are more public, such as the mappings. And this is something we want to continue to improve. But ultimately, and this is important to remember, unless you're using like Monero or a privacy coin that's built in, you're always going to have some level of trackability. There's always going to be this understanding that as you transfer from one address to another address to another address, that it can essentially be tracked as far as where those addresses are connected to. And then on to Brad Spanbauer. Thank you. Shout out to Brad. You've done some amazing work in the community already. If you haven't checked out FIO.tools or FIO.wiki, some really cool stuff that Brad's been working on. Is there a critical mass of exchange FIO adoption, not the token, where supporting a FIO address becomes the standard? I mean, if you don't support FIO, it hurts your business. Oh, that's such a great question. I would think if we get, for example, 3 to 5 major exchanges that have added FIO to their deposit and withdraw area, and more people experience that for the first time, just a handful, I mean, really 3 to 5 exchanges, that's when I personally think you're going to have this understanding that this is just so much better than the previous experience. I don't have to worry about all these different addresses. I don't have to whitelist different withdrawal addresses and stuff. It's purely based on a simple, human readable FIO address. That I think is going to be a big moment. I think that's going to be the point where every exchange that doesn't have that, every wallet that doesn't support that, they're gonna be like, man, I need to go do this. This is so much better. Combined again with the economic incentives to do so. So that's my hope. Just a handful of exchanges I think are gonna make a big difference as far as that. And as far as it like hurting your business, it's kind of, how long did it take for Blockbuster to just disappear, right? I mean, Netflix shows up, and when you digitize things that are, and you solve problems that are otherwise causing people stress and frustration, some people like spending their night wandering up and down the aisles trying to find a video only to find out there's no copies left, but I remember that and it was annoying, right? And I think that we're going to feel the same way about sending cryptocurrency the old way, the legacy way, copying these crazy hashes, using QR codes, like thinking through, like, is this the right address? It's just stressful. And I think we're going to remember that as the old way. And as soon as people start using the new way, and I felt this personally, you start to get annoyed at the old way of doing things. You're like, why is this wallet not using FIO yet? It's just so much better.
Yeah, and I think too, just to add on to that, all this stuff is timing as well, to be quite frank. And I think what's exciting is if we're potentially on the cusp of a new bull run, and we're going to have a lot of new people coming in here. I think a lot of companies out there, we've been able to be a little complacent, I think, a little bit during the last couple of years, because we haven't had as many people making kind of really stupid mistakes in our products, because the only people who are here right now kind of know what they're doing a little bit more than what happened in 2017 and 18. But if we have that influx of people who come in again, who literally spend no time learning about how to use any of this stuff, and they're just making mistakes left and right, sending Bitcoin to a Bitcoin Cash address or something like that. And I think something like FIO becomes a much more eminent need for a lot of these wallets exchanges. It's no longer just sort of a theoretically nice to have for the future. We are being inundated right now with customer support issues regarding public addresses. can't teach these people how these things work because they don't want to learn. So we just got to make it simple. And that's where FIO, I think, is able to step in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really neat to have a whole new crop of cryptocurrency advocates who just never even deal with the old way. It's kind of like you don't go build landlines if you're bringing in phone service. You just go right to cell phones. That kind of method of how we onboard people in the future, I think, is going to be pretty exciting. I think we've got our last, or a couple of the last questions here.
Maybe one more question, yeah, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I said you got one more question. So we've actually just got two. If we can sneak them in, I think they're both pretty good. How the demand of your token will increase in the future, and what steps would you take to increase the demand? I think that relates to the whole tokenomics of the system. So the token itself is actually needed to pay for all on-chain services. So when someone gets a FIO address, they get a FIO domain. And we actually have a little tool that we've been playing around with internally. It's a little spreadsheet that we're probably going to put up on the website at some point, where you could kind of make assumptions about what you think the global usage of cryptocurrency will be in the future, how many transactions are going to take place, how many users will end up getting a FIO address or a FIO domain, kind of like, web domains, and how many people have email addresses on those domains, and kind of like make some assumptions to kind of figure things out and recognize, like, okay, if all of this activities happen, if we do actually believe that cryptocurrency is the future of blockchain or future of finance, then what will that look like for the protocol? How many on-chain transactions are going to be happening, and what is going to be the demand for those tokens? So for example, if a major merchant is doing a whole bunch of FIO requests to make their checkout experience much better, how many tokens are they going to need to facilitate that level of interaction? And is it going to be worth it to them? Because again, they don't want to pay the 2 to 3% credit card fees. Everyone's using crypto now. They save a lot of money from there. They save money on customer support issues that they'd have otherwise if they were using cryptocurrency without this. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that can be thought through as far as the token itself and how it secures the network, but also provides the utility of interacting with the protocol. But beyond that, we can't really speculate beyond that. But we're going to have some, like I said, tools and things like that to kind of think through those conversations. And then the last question we'll get here comes from Dan again. 51% of tax. How does the FIO react to a block reorg? As settlement will be undone, quote unquote. Is that somehow reflected on the FIO chain? It's a really great question, because there's a level of security that you need in FIO that is in some ways a little bit different than some other chains. For example, if I map my address to a Bitcoin address, and then there's a remapping, a reorg of the chain, and someone can attack the chain, go back, fork it, and map my address to their attacker's Bitcoin address. Well, that would be very scary, right? Because if somebody actually sent and did a lookup in that moment, they might get the wrong address and send it to the wrong location. So these are things that we're thinking very seriously about. We have some really interesting conversations going on with our block producers. A lot of people are not talking about this in the space, and it's actually pretty important. When you're interacting with, for example, an Ethereum contract or Ethereum platform, you're not actually talking in most cases to the raw blockchain. You're not talking to like a node with your software. You're actually hitting an API endpoint, an application programmer interface. You're hitting a URL, and you're doing gets and posts, but you're trusting that that API, that URL, is connecting directly to valid blockchain data. But if a hacker is able to get in there and take over that server, for example, even if it's an SSL endpoint, they can have control of what information you get from that URL, which is going to then impact your application. So we've been talking with our privacy committee, as well as our block producers, about ways that you can validate the information coming from that URL to be completely 100% as secure as the data on chain itself, using Byzantine fault tolerance, the same exact thing you trust in a DPoS system on chain. You could validate the data from multiple endpoints to ensure that the data you got was completely accurate and secure. Now, as far as how we can ensure reorgs don't become a problem, it's a good question. There's a lot of different people in the DPoS space for both Hive and EOS, and also proof of stake, trying to figure this out as well. There's ideas of checkpoints. There's also ideas of taking FIO hashes of Merkle tree and putting that on other chains like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So you could have these checkpoints to say, as of this moment, I can 100% securely trust every bit of data on the FIO chain as being unmodified, because this is the same hash that's being put into the Bitcoin blockchain. And I can know that didn't get modified because I trust the value and security of the Bitcoin blockchain. So there's a number of ways that we can do this. I think that FIO in some ways can be a second layer solution to projects today that are thinking they have to kind of build on some non-blockchain solution to accomplish some of the same things we're doing. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. And then of course, yeah, base chains, that's actually kind of what you're getting to. Sending and receiving FIO on that chain, that would be very interesting. Obviously, a lot of tokens are getting wrapped today, wrapped in Ethereum, wrapped in EOS. There's nothing that prevents someone wrapping FIO, of course, but it's, I think it's more about that interoperability discussion we had earlier, whether or not that's something that the community is going to want or need. But I personally think it'd be great, because then basically people can interact with their ecosystem that they're most comfortable with, whether that's Ethereum or EOS or Cardano or whatever it might be, without having to kind of learn a whole new set of tools for signing messages and things of that nature. So I think that's going to become more and more popular in the future. I think we're running out of time here. Thank you so much for all the people. It looks like we had more than a dozen people the whole call. For those who stuck around, really appreciate your questions. And thank you so much. This is our first AMA we've ever done. I think it went pretty well, John. I appreciate, experimenting here and trying it out. I'd like to do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks everyone for joining. Again, if you are new to FIO Protocol, join our website, our Telegram, Discord, to follow us on Twitter. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. And by all means, let us know if you want us to do anything different. We'll try to do live streams across multiple platforms in the future. But this was our first attempt. And so, yeah, thank you very much for joining. Talk to you later.
Take care.